Ghostbusters Frozen Empire is now out playing in theaters. So starting off with the positives, for me, the best thing about Ghostbusters Frozen Empire is that it totally feels like a Ghostbusters movie. And what I mean by that is, in Afterlife, you were establishing a new set of characters, you were revamping, you were kickstarting this original movie's timeline once again after like 30 years. So I get that they want to do something a little bit different, like take the movie to a farmland in the middle of nowhere, and throw in some familiar elements such as Gozar and, the whole Keymaster bit, and the original Ghostbusters coming in as a cameo at the end of the film. But this movie feels like it fully embraces the Ghostbusters movies before it. We are back in New York City. We are driving the Ecto-1 down the streets of Manhattan. We're once again living in the iconic firehouse. All of these scenes and all of these images of familiarity just bring such comfort and joy to the screen when you see these familiar sets and places and characters in these environments, and that feeling lasted for the entire runtime for me. Some of the visual and spoken references to the original movie can get a little bit overhanded, but at the same time, they just provide a lot of fun into the screenplay. Another element that feels like it's returning here in the Ghostbusters franchise is that this movie does have some legit horrific sequences. They're not like hard R horror movie scary sequences, but for a Ghostbusters movie, there's some sequences and some images in here that were a little bit more disturbing and, for lack of a better word, chilling. No pun intended. But like Ghostbusters films before it, it balances that horror with the lighthearted, sarcastic, comedic chops from our leads. And I thought that this movie struck that balance pretty well. And honestly, for me, this is probably one of the scariest Ghostbusters threats that they've had in any of the movies. The ghost in this movie that's able to freeze people to literal death, the movie sets up the stakes and really does make you feel the threat of this evil, villainous ghost against the Ghostbusters, to the point that by the time we get to the Ghostbusters versus this big ghost, I was legit trying to figure out, like, okay, but how are they going to defeat this thing? And going on with the positives, it is a lot of fun to see the original Ghostbusters teamed up with this new cast. Officially, they're not just cameos this time around. Well, maybe Bill Murray you can count as a cameo. He's in the movie for maybe 10, 15 minutes, if I'm being generous. But Dan Aykroyd, Ernie Hudson, they are all throughout this narrative. They're teamed up with these new characters. And I thought it really worked, especially Dan Aykroyd coming back as Ray. He's the OG Ghostbuster that is really essential to the story. He's teamed up with Mckenna Grace as Phoebe for a majority of the movie. And I just found that those characters they really work together. And I had a big smile on my face watching them on screen. Now, with all that said, as a straight-up Ghostbusters movie, I found there was a lot to enjoy. However, as a movie, and if you're not a hardcore Ghostbusters fan, it's pretty messy. Because first off, there are way too many characters in this movie. Not only do you have our new cast along with the original Ghostbusters, but then they add additions into the cast such as Patton Oswalt, Kumail Nanjiani, Emily Lynn Lind, along with some of the side characters from Afterlife, like Podcast and Finn Wolfhard's girlfriend that I totally forgot about. I had to look her up after I watched the movie, who the character was. There's like 12, 15 people that you were following on screen, and it can be a lot. And it can be a lot on this movie, because with those characters come way too many subplots. The main two plots of this movie revolve around Dan Aykroyd and Mckenna Grace going around and trying to uncover this mystery surrounding our big bad ghost this time around, as well as Phoebe making a friend with an actual ghost. The movie alludes that maybe it's a little bit more than a friendship, but in the movie context, they do establish it's a friendship. So we're going to go with friendship for now. And those two A and B plots would have been enough, but then you've got all these characters that all need to be doing something, and then it just gets to the point where the movie just has too much weight on itself. I mean, poor Finn Wolfhard, man. I feel so bad for this kid. He is once again sidelined in this Ghostbusters movie. I imagine that when Finn Wolfhard gets these scripts for Ghostbusters, he's just like, what the heck? I was the Ghostbuster for more screen time in Stranger Things. Yeah, Finn Wolfhard's only thing to do in this movie is try to catch a ghost in the attic for comedic relief. It's just so obvious as you watch the movie. There are characters that they could have cut out, not just to save time and the budget, but also to save the pace of this movie. Because the pace of this movie, with all this going on, it's not that I was ever bored watching this movie, but there were times where I definitely felt the length, and I was like, is this almost over? And nope, we've got 45 more minutes left. I guess we'll just watch Finn Wolfhard try to catch this ghost with Cheetos. One character, though, that they've included that I'm so glad they include because he steals the show is Kumail Nanjiani. He is by far the funniest thing in this movie because the jokes in this movie, when they land pretty softly, but when they fall pretty flat. So the movie's not like overly hilarious. I was chuckling all throughout, but Kumail Nanjiani, man, the way that he delivers his line dialogue, just like the jokes, the natural funniness that comes out of this man, he was the show stealer. I loved seeing him in here. If they do a third one, they've got to bring him back. All in all, when it comes to Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, I found that the whole movie was good enough. How was the acting? Good enough. How was the story? Good enough. The villain? Good enough. The comedy? Good enough. The horror? Good enough. But I'm also not a huge Ghostbusters fan. I didn't grow up with this franchise. I didn't see the first one until I was very late into my teens. I like the first one. I like Afterlife, but that's about it. And I would add this one to the group. In fact, I would say that this is probably my favorite that they've done since the original, but that's not saying much for me, who's a very casual Ghostbusters fan and doesn't really find that much love in this franchise. So if you're like a massive Ghostbusters fan, I think there's a lot of nostalgia. I think there's a lot of continuation and expansion on the lore of Ghostbusters in this movie. This is one thing that this does have over Afterlife, is this is a totally fresh new movie. You don't have Gozer, you don't have the Keymaster, they don't recycle things from the old film like they do in Afterlife. This is a fresh new Ghostbusters story with the new and original cast, and like I said, it's good enough, and I'm going to give it a weak recommend. I don't think it's a must-see, but I enjoyed it while it was on screen, but I'm probably not going to rush out to watch it again anytime soon. Anyway, guys, those are all my thoughts and opinions on Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. What did you guys think of this movie? Have you had a chance to check it out yet? Comment down below. Let me know. I love to hear all your thoughts and opinions about this movie. And if you're new here and you haven't heard, we have a goal on this channel. We want to hit 4,000 subscribers. If you're new here and you haven't subscribed yet, we talk about movies all the time. Ghostbusters, Marvel, DC, action, adventure. We talk about it all. And if you love talking about movies as well, we'd love to have you join our little community over here. Consider hitting that subscribe button before you make your way out. As always, guys, thank you so much for hearing me out, and I hope to talk to you guys again real soon.